I'm joined now by Dave Sather, founder of Sather Financial Group in Victoria, Texas. And I should mention we're here in Omaha, where this morning we held an event here for MOI Global, of which you were supporters. So I very much appreciate that. Appreciate everything you've done for the MOI Global community. And thanks for being here.
Thank you for the invite.
Yeah, so 26 years.
26 years.
So you're celebrating 26 years this week, is that correct?
This week, yeah.
Yeah, so what I want to do is dive in a little bit to sort of how you build and manage your fund, and sort of what you would give in advice for someone that's wants to do something similar. But I want to start a little bit with your background, and we'll work our way there. So tell me about Victoria, Texas, and tell me about your process of sort of planning and strategizing to start your firm.
So Victoria, Texas is where my wife lived, and as a prerequisite to get married, she told me, I love you, but I'm not so sure about living in Houston or any other big city. So she had family obligations in the area, and I was trying to be respectful of that. So I started trying to figure out, how do you move to Victoria, Texas, and found out that there was a UBS office there. Ended up getting a job, and I cold called everybody in the phone book for the first 3.5 years. Decided that was not how I wanted to make my living. The oldest bank in Texas happened to be in Victoria, and even though they had run in a trust department for 100 years, they never had a trust investment officer. So at the ripe age of 28, they hired me to package their investments and to start their brokerage operation. So at a very young age, it put me in a position to be able to sit in on every committee that a bank would have, got me in a position to see how credit flowed through a given community, who was creditworthy, who was not, see which businesses actually made money. Victoria is very much of an agricultural area. However, we've never met a wealthy cattle rancher that didn't have a few oil wells in the backyard. Happened to be a little bit of oil money there. And so that was kind of how I got there, and how the first 8 years of my career were Payne Weber, followed by a bank's trust department. But the insemination to leave and start my firm, it really was not some grand plan that I had. Rather, it was 1998, 1999, and people were following the mania of the day. So tech, internet, and telecom. And you could see these companies that had no earnings. Many of them had no sales. They were just concepts, and they were being bid up sometimes 50% in a day. And you're sitting there saying, I know that logically and rationally this does not make sense. This will end bad, but everybody is headed in that direction. And here I am writing commentaries to the bank's clients on, there's not a new economy. It's the same economy. Be careful. This is going to end badly. Well, the bank didn't want to pursue that more value investing, traditional Buffett and Munger mentality. And that was kind of a signal to me that maybe I didn't fit there. They definitely helped me to understand I was a square peg trying to fit in a round hole. The other thing that I had learned during that time frame was I had never met a wealthy person who only had investment needs. They have tax planning needs, they have retirement needs, estate planning, risk management. So pretty much I thought, if these are the highest net worth people in our community, we need to make sure that we are helping them to evaluate anything that has a large price tag on it. And so we started doing that, and I wanted the bank to pursue that also. And they were like, no, that's really not what we do. And I just thought, no, that's exactly what you should be doing. But the fact that they did not want to pursue it, again, helped me to understand square peg in a round hole. When I left to go pursue that, it just was like lighter fluid. I mean, our firm just started growing by leaps and bounds. It made it a very easy transition for me to offer a service that was differentiated than what anybody else was offering, and created for great relationships along the way.
So can you talk to me a little bit about your client focus? I know you spoke about this and written about this in the past, and what in your mind are the key tenets of maintaining that client focus and relationship building skill, and how has that been important to your success?
Yeah, so again, I live in a rural community. So our town is 60,000. The closest large city is roughly 2 hours away. So lots of small country towns, and people do business based on relationships. They're very slow to move relationships. Typically, we get business based on a seed that was planted 10 years or earlier. It takes a long time for that, that tree to germinate and really produce, the wonderful blossom. And as a result, when thinking through those relationships, there's a couple key things. Number one, we try to be very transparent in what we're doing. So we manage separate accounts, which is much harder than managing a pooled fund. But in doing so, our clients have full transparency into what we're doing every day. So if we buy, a new holding, they see it immediately. If we sell something, they see it immediately. So there's a lot more transparency. And even though that's more difficult, we believe that it gives us a much stickier relationship as opposed to a person investing into a pooled fund. So that is a huge differentiator. Just being able to pick up the phone, answer the phone when a client calls, especially when the market is really choppy. Spent a lot of time this year trying to talk about tariffs, understandably, and how it will or won't impact them, and trying to teach them about what are the things that actually matter to you, your family, and your portfolio. So if you will embrace that communication, you can head off a lot of bad things before they ever happen. So trying to be a good communicator. We are a big believer in being able to write out a thesis. It may be an 80-page research paper, but you've got to be able to write out the thesis in a one-page executive summary. If you can't do that, then you really don't have a command of the subject matter. Number one, you're not going to be able to explain it to your clients in a manner that says, this is why it matters to you. And if they don't see how it is going to take care of their family, they start to veer off course. Well, I hear my neighbor is doing great things and I'm going to follow that path. They've got to understand the how and the why, at least at a conceptual level, of how you are going to take care of their family. At the end of the day, the reason we are on the face of the earth is to take care of other people. It might be investment management, it might be accounting, it might be law, but we are dealing with the most intimate thing that you can ever have a conversation with a stranger about, their money. And as a result, so often we're trying to help them with very complicated yet very sensitive issues. Many of our conversations actually turn into almost counseling sessions. There's a lot of behavioral finance dynamics that go into helping people feel comfortable with their money. And then, as Morgan Housel would say, help build out an investment allocation that will allow them to compound for the longest time possible. Whatever the best investment strategy is, it's the one they can hang in there with the longest time frame.
Can you talk a little bit about the memorandum of understanding that you've mentioned that you like to write out for your clients? And even structurally, this seems like a good piece of advice for someone that's trying to build a client base or wanting to sort of strike out on their own. Can you talk about that piece?
Yeah, it's interesting. When you're young and you're hungry, you will do a lot of things to put food on the table. But in time, you realize there's only 24 hours in a day, and you've got to allocate them to all the stakeholders. That might be your clients, it might be your staff, it might be your family, it may just be peace of mind for yourself. So when you realize that, the 80-20 rule really matters. So the larger the client, actually the less demanding they are. Quite often they are less fee conscious. They are much more understanding of trying to understand where are we headed and why, and does it make sense? But a lot of times you get people that are either control people or they just want to use up a lot of your time. There are people that are just not a fit in terms of their personality. And as a result, one very clear indicator, if I see your name come up on our caller ID and I cringe, if I think, if this person wants to go to lunch, am I going to come up with an excuse as to why we shouldn't have lunch with them? That's a client that should not be in our world, because I'm not going to do as good a job as I really should be able to do. And so that's really a big one. And that's just one that comes from time. And we've been very blunt with clients about, we gave you this advice. You did not listen to us. It hurt you in this manner. And if it continues to happen, we're not going to allocate good time, resources, and input into your life if you're not going to listen to us. Because again, we don't think that they're valuing the relationship. There has to be a two-way street there. So just trying to figure out who that is very important. And it's funny, I think in one paper that we put down, if a doctor or a lawyer walks through my office and a guy that runs a machine shop walks through my office at the same time, 9 times out of 10 will work for the machine shop operator over the doctor or lawyer. Doctors and lawyers are prima donnas. They are used to spending a lot. And, if they make $500,000, they spend 501. And they're used to people falling at their feet to bow before them and tell them how smart they are. The machine shop operator is trying to run a business in the most efficient manner. You are part of his professional team, and he expects you to do your job. So he wants to have a meaningful relationship, but it's a two-way street. And they recognize we are there to provide them with value. That is the cornerstone of really great relationships. And so again, just knowing who we like to work for. If you've ever read the book, The Millionaire Next Door or The Millionaire Mind, those are our clients. That is the bread and butter of what's allowed us to get to almost $2 billion in assets, is working for entrepreneurs that just work really hard. They wear boots and blue jeans. They drive pickup trucks. They are sophisticated people in their field, but they recognize their sophistication is not in the field of investing. They are hiring us to bring that together and then to coordinate with the rest of their professional team.
So if I walked into your office tomorrow and wanted to become a client, do you actually write that down, sort of the expectations you have of them and they should have of you? Is that something you actually, I'm assuming you communicate all these things up front. Do you actually give them a sheet of paper, or how do you go about communicating that to a new client?
We do have a written document. Okay. It stays internal because it's become a training tool for our staff. You are an engineer by training. And I will tell you, engineers fall in a special category. We love them, but they're very difficult to deal with because they're trying to figure out what can go wrong with this process, and then they reverse it to make sure it doesn't. There are so many variables in the investment world that engineers often have a hard time getting comfort with it. We actually have become very skilled with that. But we have some engineers that want to micromanage. And so there are, on our checklist, that memorandum, there are certain items that will kind of be a red flag to us that says, hey, Tyler is continuing to try and micromanage the process. Every time we say, hey, we put Dollar General in their portfolio and it goes down, they're immediately harping on us. Well, what's the thesis? And I need to hear this over again. Then we are increasingly upfront, if not direct, with you hired us to do a job. You are not allowing us to do the job. You are paying us to do a job, and you are not getting value out of it. If you're not going to get value out of it, we're not going to have a good relationship, and that is going to harm it, and ultimately we're going to move on. And so it's on a case-by-case basis. You don't want to come out with the big guns on day one and just go, here's the 10 things, and if you violate any of them, you're fired. Sometimes that seems overly heavy-handed. And so we try and gain an understanding of who people are. Going back to the behavioral finance side of things, if I had college to do all over again, I would have majored in behavioral finance. The how and the why people make financial decisions would make us so much better in what we do today in trying to help them understand this is why we're here. This is how we help you and your family. If you want our help, this is how it's going to need to happen. Otherwise, you're not going to get good value from the relationship.
Do you ever wonder if an asset manager that doesn't have an economics education or a value investing, had never been through a value investing program, might have some advantage in trying to do this business?
Actually, yes. So I will tell you, I have a business degree, but I have never taken an investments class in my life. I was not exposed to some of those concepts until I got to graduate school. And even in graduate school, they didn't make sense. Fortunately, very early on in my career, this is a story I've told before, but I was getting ready to go to New York for some of my training. And there was this older gentleman who said, "Oh, you're going to go to New York and do some of that fancy book learning." And I said, "Yes, sir." And he goes, "You don't need any of that. I'm going to tell you everything you need to know in one sentence." And I kind of rolled my eyes and dismissed him. And he said, "Eat them, drink them, smoke them, go to the doctor, and look good when you get there." And I kind of had this, hazy look in my eyes. And he goes, "I'll repeat it because I can see you don't get it. Eat them, your food companies, drink them, your beverage companies, smoke them." He said, "I don't smoke, but if people want to, I'll invest in it. Go to the doctor, healthcare companies, things like that." And then he stopped and he said, "You're engaged, aren't you?" And I said, "Yes, sir." And he goes, "I'm going to tell you something about your fiance that you don't know, but you need to know. She is going to allow the house to burn down around her before she goes out in public without her hair and nails being done. So my last category for you is beauty supplies, things that make us feel good about ourselves." And he said, "If you'll invest in those types of companies, you will never be the popular kid at the cocktail party, but you will always be able to keep your clients in the game." And in his simple way of saying that, he was giving me, volumes of investment research, because he was ultimately saying you've got to find the path that allows them to compound for the longest period of time. So I went off to New York and started my career. And shortly after that, I started reading about Buffett. And he was already the largest shareholder in Coca-Cola, drink them. And then he bought all of Dairy Queen, eat them. And I just started, studying everything I could, inhaling it. And because I did not have that formal investment background, I was much more open to accepting that type of an education of eat them, drink them, smoke them, and then seeing Buffett buying Coke and Dairy Queen. It helped me to understand, okay, this is a great pond to fish in. Let's dig a little bit deeper. Let's try and figure out what makes them great businesses. I never would have had, even if I took the investments course undergraduate or in graduate school, I never would have been exposed to that. The fact that I wasn't exposed to it allowed me to be completely a blank slate when I was.
What advice would you give to a young asset manager about building a team?
Cool. When I first started, I obviously had been in the business 8 years. I had done some aptitude testing, and they told me that I was good in business, I was good working with people, and I was good with languages. So I didn't realize it at the time, but finance and explaining value investing is a language all of its own. So getting back to being able to explain things in one page or less, I've got that gift. And so they also told me that I was really bad at paperwork. So I am the guy that can bring it together. I can sit down with people. I can help them to understand the bigger picture, but I am not good at organizing and collating and filing. So at age 19, when I took that test, they said, you haven't started your investment firm and you won't for another 13 years. But the first person you need to hire is a top-notch admin person. So that was employee number one. And then employee number two, I thought, man, I really need to figure out, find a person who has my same skill set in case I'm killed in a car accident. They'll be able to step right in. So I hired somebody who is pretty much 180-degree opposite of me. He is now the president of our firm. His skill set, though, is so complementary to what I do, and we make a wonderful team. We have the commonality of seeing value investing very similarly, but his skill set on the technical side is something I'll never be able to do. My ability with people is something that just comes naturally to me. And so we work well as a team. So you've got to find people that are going to bring the right skill set to the table. You also have to find people who just genuinely are curious, because every day is a new day in this business. And what worked in the 1990s didn't work in the aughts. What worked in the aughts didn't work in the 10s. And now that we're in the 20s, it's a whole new ball game. But at the end of the day, our job is to take care of people and to care about people. And if you're not sincere about why you exist, that my job is to take care of you, then you may have some people who are really good on the technical side, but they may not bring the right moral compass to the table, or they may just not find the fulfillment in the industry that they think they're looking for.
Can you speak a little bit about your peer evaluation system that you use?
So, early on, it was an office of three. Every conversation went through me. Well, now we have two offices. And so there's 5 in one office and 6 in another office. And the other office is 2 hours away. Well, I am no longer the focal point of every conversation, much to my ego's, being bruised. And that's a good thing, because that tells me that I'm not the guy. I'm not the most important thing. We now actually have a team. But in thinking through that, I recognized I'm no longer in the catbird seat in terms of trying to be able to evaluate who is doing well, who's having good conversations, who's struggling, and why are we struggling. And so coming out of 08, 09, I did two things. Number one, I established a profit sharing plan in which every employee participates in profit sharing. So 7% of the net profits of the firm are distributed once a quarter. If you've been with the firm 1 year or more, everybody's eligible. Whether you are the king, ruler, supreme of all investment managers, or you an admin person, I want everybody to have a bite of the apple. Because otherwise what happens is your people that are capable of developing new business, they come in, they make it rain, they dump a ton of paperwork on the admin team, and the admin team, if they don't get a bite of the apple, they just resent all that new business. So that was point number one. Point number two, I just realized that as we got bigger, I did not have the same command. So divvying up the profit sharing is a component that 25% is longevity, how long you've been with our firm, but 75% of it is peer evaluations. So everybody in the firm evaluates everybody else once a quarter and says, this is what's working, this is what's not working, I've got a problem with this person, or I love working with this person, and here's the reasons why. And even though our people are having lots of conversations through every single day, it allows me to have an understanding of who's getting along, who's not getting along, who deserves to be promoted, who needs some help in terms of trying to get from point A to point B. And so that's really the heart of it. It's not any more complicated than that. So everybody has to be evaluated on a scale of 1 to 10, which is very simple, but it's a crude methodology. But then I ask them, give me written feedback of what's working and what's not.
When you instituted the 7% profit share, were there ways you could demonstrably see the incentive, like in your admins, for instance? Are there ways you can track that, or anecdotes that you have about seeing that incentive play out in day-to-day business?
Yes, most definitely. So my first admin had worked with me at the bank, and I can remember when we put that into place, and we had a relatively new admin that had come from Wells Fargo. So great big organization. And so Cindy, my longtime admin, saw the admin from Wells Fargo throwing a piece of paper in the trash, and it had a paper clip attached to it. And she said, hold on a second, we don't throw away paper clips. She said, you're affecting my profit sharing. And she said, that impacts my ability to pay my mortgage and my ability to send my daughter to college. So please be concerned when it comes to using company resources that we do so in the most efficient manner possible. I didn't have to say a word. I mean, the employees were reinforcing the mindset that I wanted them to embrace in terms of building a good culture of let's keep our expenses really low. If we do so, profitability goes up and everybody shares.
Yeah. So if someone's watching this and they're sort of like a 1999 Dave Sather at a bank and they're thinking about striking out, what would you tell them about setting up? And I know you spoke about this idea of playing defense and being prepared. What are the key elements you would suggest someone do to get off on the right foot?
Yeah. So first, I think you've got to have experience in the business. I see a lot of people that want to, go down a certain path and they just don't have the requisite level of experience. Many people, now 26 years in have gone, oh, don't you wish that you had left the bank earlier? Sure, in a perfect world, but perfect world doesn't exist. I needed that 8 years of experience of meeting people, of learning how to develop my craft, how to manage portfolios. For much of this, I was very much on my own. So I was trying to figure out what worked for me, what worked for clients, how to explain it to people. I needed that time. I needed graduate school and I needed another 8 years of experience before I went off on my own. So that was point number one, get the requisite level of experience, whether that means working for a brokerage firm, working for a trust department, wherever it might be. You are getting paid to learn on somebody else's dime and time. Don't overlook that. Number two, I knew that my job was to take care of people. I knew that the market was getting very frothy in 99. And again, understand what your mandate and your moral compass says about why we exist. I knew that if I stayed, there were some cultural issues going on at the bank in which they wanted to sell very high commission products. I wanted to get away from that. I knew the combination of pursuing the highest commission product along with the valuation of the market, that was going to be very bad. So set yourself up to take care of the people that you are supposed to. The other thing too is that, I was relatively young in my marriage at the time and money was still very tight. But before I left, I had saved up about enough money to live off of for 3 years. And I'd kind of mapped out that if I couldn't make this work in 3 years, it just may not be in the cards. So I had enough money to where I knew that I would be okay. I could make sure that I didn't have to make short-term decisions. I could invest in the business and in people for a longer time frame. Those things were really, really important. And then when I did leave the bank, I'd kind of mapped out. I never told my clients ahead of time that I was leaving, but there were always rumors that our bank was going to be sold. My standard response to everybody was, there are rumors that the bank is going to be sold. I have no knowledge or insight into that. But if the bank does get sold, no matter where I'm working, no matter, what the name is, I will always be available to take care of you and your family. Most people were smart enough to read between the lines, such that 15 months later, when I did leave, they were like, oh, okay, this is what Dave was talking about. So there was the money issue. There was the communication issue of, I am here to take care of you. I spent a lot of time over a 15-month time frame writing my business plan, refining my business plan, thinking about which people were most likely to go with me if I did leave. And those things all came true in such a manner that when I did leave, I was also very upfront with them. I said, I am a staff of one. It is unfair to you and your family for me to ask you to move your money from the oldest bank in Texas without me having the necessary safeguards that are in place as they exist today. And I said, so if you'll go with me, if you're one of my original clients, I'm not going to charge anybody for the first 3 months because I know I'm going to have to get systems up and running. Something will go wrong. And I need to be in a position to where it's not hurting you financially. So if you'll go with me for the first quarter, I'm not going to charge you anything. And I think they appreciated that. They appreciated so many of my clients were entrepreneurs. They remembered those days. And so kind of that combination of things allowed us to be positioned defensively. I saved up enough money. I had paid for all my technology and all that stuff. We didn't borrow a penny in order to develop the business. And then it was just a matter of following up with people and doing a good job from an investment perspective.
Speaking of getting the systems up and running, are there vendors, softwares, processes that you think are key to your success or that you would advise people to look into?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, MOI Global. There's a shameless plug. I mean, I've been friends with John Mahaljevic since 2009. And I remember when he was starting MOI Global, and he was going down a very similar path that I was. And I just liked him. You know, there's a true sincerity in terms of understanding the business and trying to do things right. So subscription to MOI has always been very appreciated, as much just because of the people that I've met along the way. But I don't think you have to spend a fortune. So, you know, a Bloomberg machine, you can drop $60,000 a month on a Bloomberg machine. I don't think it's necessary, depending on how you want to run your business. If you really want to do this on a tight budget, you can get a Value Line subscription and a Morningstar subscription through your local library for free. GuruFocus.com is another Texas entrepreneur that I have known Charlie Tian, the founder of that, almost since he started. And that is a platform that we use on a regular basis. There's wonderful tools for pulling 13Fs. There's wonderful tools for doing screening. There's a lot of articles on there. And that's not very expensive. After you get, you know, your feet on the ground, then you can start trying to figure out what else works. You know, it's like on the portfolio management side, in terms of producing reports and things like that, we work with a company called Advizon. And Advizon's not super expensive, but it helps us to do a lot of heavy lifting, especially again with us managing multiple portfolios. The tough thing in terms of like software is the good ones are always getting bought out. And then you're almost back at ground zero in terms of trying to find somebody else that is hungry enough to return your phone calls, also willing to do it on an affordable price that you can then grow together with. There's a lot of software providers that promise everything, but functionally they're not as good as they say they are.
Has AI become a part of your process at all, anywhere in the business?
Trying to. And so one of our new guys, Joe, he is, 10 years in the Air Force doing human intelligence. He's just got a curious mind in terms of asking really good questions and thinking about things. He is the one who's probably spearheading that. But if we can write AI-informed or induced code that says, go to a 13F filing on a regular basis and start extracting certain data, it allows us to do more heavy lifting in a consistent manner in a way that I'm not having to hire more and more people. So it allows us to be more efficient. The problem is that we find if the data is not in the exact same format, in the exact same place every month, then all of a sudden you're constantly having to look over its shoulder or tweak it. Doesn't mean that it can't help, but certainly in terms of some of the coding that goes along with how we use DeLupa for doing Excel type add-ins, combining those worlds of AI and DeLupa and Excel add-ins, that allows us to start doing a lot more of the heavier lifting, but it's certainly not the kind of thing where you just go, hey, ChatGPT, tell me the best value investments to make today. It's, that is pie in the sky type stuff. It's still fairly early on in the development, but we think there's high hopes for it over the next 10 years.
So I know you've spent a lot of time thinking about succession in your firm. What's that experience been like, and what would you impart on someone that's running a successful fund and should maybe start thinking about this?
Yeah. So a good friend of mine ran a large insurance company, and I watched him navigate that. And his firm got too large before they went down the succession road. They ultimately had to sell to an external party because they were the ones that had the pockets deep enough. The employees did not have deep enough pockets. So recognizing that, I always had a goal that at age 50, I would start transitioning some of the ownership such that a significant portion would be moved before I turned 60. So I'm 58 today. The first round, there were 4 key lieutenants of mine, and I basically gave them 1% ownership, and then I owner financed it. So they weren't out of pocket with any money. It gave them a seat at the table. It allowed them to see the profitability of the firm. And my hope was it would open their eyes and say, this is something I really want to be a part of long term. I also think that with really good people, if you don't give them, again, a bite of the apple, you're almost inviting them to become a competitor. So why would you open up the kimono and show them everything that makes your firm valuable and then say, but you're not so valuable that I want to keep you here forever? And to me, I've been very upfront that if I am the only one who becomes wealthy from this endeavor, I'll be upset. And so round number one was four new partners, each got 1% ownership, didn't have to put out any cash. So then round two came around, and one person was not in a position to go to an investment bank. Another person actually said, well, I'd like ownership, more ownership, but I don't want to write a check for it. And that told me an awful lot about that person's motivations. Since then, they left our firm and left the industry. But the other two, Warren and John, Warren is the president of our firm, John is vice president. They went to an investment bank. They borrowed a significant sum of money to buy 17% of the firm each. So, sizable ownership. And they both just sat down and said, we see the profitability of the firm. We see the clients. Why wouldn't we want to be part of this? And so it took pretty strong intestinal fortitude for them to be able to tell their spouses, hey, we want to go borrow a couple $1,000,000 to be able to buy into this, but we think it's going to work. And so that, in my mind, told Warren, I want you to be my lifetime business partner. John, I want you to be my lifetime business partner. We are in this together. If I make a bunch of money, I want you to ride along with that too. And so there's an opportunity for round number three for the next generation to also step forward. I would imagine they'll be in a position to where they'll borrow smaller amounts of money. But to me, that's what that needs to look like. The other thing in this endeavor, I don't have any children. And as a result, succession within my family bloodline is not going to happen. And I think that is the greatest gift I ever could have been given. I wish I had children. That would be a wonderful blessing. The fact that I don't have children to pass the business down, I actually think that means that I'll make a better business decision in terms of succession.
Yeah, and them, being involved and invested in the process can only reinforce the value of the total business. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so we are in Omaha. That means wall-to-wall engagement, so I want to be respectful of your time. But before we wrap up, I'd like to talk a little bit about the Bulldog Investment Company. I know that's something that's very near and dear to your heart. So can you tell me what that experience has been like for you, and what do you think is unique about that program?
So, my alma mater is Texas Lutheran University. It is 1,400 students in Seguin, Texas, which is halfway between San Antonio and Austin. They've always had a very strong business program, but it is not a Wall Street feeder program. It's in rural Texas. But I knew that I'd gotten an incredibly good education there, really good on the fundamentals and the discipline. So I was serving on an advisory board for the business department, and we were talking about the importance of internships. And when I left, I started thinking about what we do day in and day out in terms of identifying competitive advantages, running through the financials and figuring out why is a business successful, why isn't a business successful, what are the hallmarks of what makes for a good investment. And I just thought, I think there's an opportunity to create an internship here. So without much more understanding, that was the goal, was to create an internship that met at Texas Lutheran every week to teach how to break down businesses and identify it, and then package it in a Warren Buffett wrapper. So the program started by teaching kids how to break down 10Ks and 10Qs and stuff like that. But then they had to break into teams, and they had to go research into ideas that they thought conformed to the way that Warren Buffett would analyze a business and something he might want to own inside of Berkshire Hathaway. So the teams would then present their best idea 3 times a semester to a professional panel of investors. And that was our board of directors. So sometimes it would be me, sometimes the CFO of the university, sometimes we would have guest judges. And that's how we started populating the portfolio. And that was how the discipline worked. And so initially I told students, you've got to be in the program a minimum of 2 semesters. But at the end of 2 semesters, I thought, okay, see you later, have a good life. But they didn't leave. And I just thought, well, I'm not going to kick you out. If you want to show up every Friday afternoon for 2.5, 3 hours, and then do even more homework, I am going to embrace you with everything I've got. So as a result, some of my best students stayed 4 years and 5 years in the program year round. And they became mentors and teachers to the new students coming in. So fast forward, now we've just finished out year 15, now in year 16. The program has produced returns. The student portfolio is now over $2 million. They have produced returns in excess of 15% a year since inception. And even just as importantly, they have all gone on to do really good things with their careers. But in terms of the Bulldog Investment Company program, there's a competition called the Texas Investment Portfolio Symposium, in which other schools that have student-managed funds can present their ideas, how their program is structured and their results, and then answer questions to a panel of professional judges. So the last 3 years in a row, Texas Lutheran has won it all, beating schools like Baylor, Rice, SMU, TCU, Texas State, really, tier 1 schools. That's when I knew, okay, this actually has some pretty cool bragging rights. But this last year, year number 15, our accreditation body, the Accreditation Council for Business Schools, it oversees the business curriculum of more than 1,200 schools, not only in the U.S., but internationally too. So the program at TLU, at Texas Lutheran Bulldog Investment Company, was chosen as the number 1 student-led business program out of all 1,200 schools. So when I think back on everything that has been produced, I do believe that the students go on to do really great things. They have a career in front of them that will allow them to be very productive. And I think Bulldog Investment Company has been very much a focal point of their career success. But it's nice that we've been able to gain a little bit of recognition with the Texas Investment Portfolio Symposium and the Accreditation Council to recognize us. That tells me that great things happen even at small universities if you're willing to put in the work.
So any final thoughts, any things we didn't cover, pieces of advice? Just love for you to have the last word.
I will tell you, I think the investment world as a whole can be judged pretty harshly. And for anybody who's listening, I think you already drink the Kool-Aid, but the value investing world is a different subset of the investment world. And I have found there are so many kind, generous people that are willing to give their time, their expertise, their mentorship to help young people either in college or in the business. They are deep thinkers, they are patient, they are kind. There's just a whole different group of people that you get to meet in the true value investing world as opposed to the broader investment world. And I think once you realize that, you end up making some really lifelong relationships. I mean, you and I have known each other quite a long time now. John and I have known each other going back to 2009. And I just think about how much better off my life is just because of the cool people that I've met along the way. So coming to events like the MOI Global Breakfast here in Omaha, I've gotten to meet so many other really interesting people that I never would have crossed paths for if it wasn't for